Dr. Maya Ellison had barely settled into seat 2A when a shadow fell across her. A man with a stiff jaw and a louder presence than necessary leaned in, pointing at her armrest. "Ma'am, that's my seat." He didn't lift his boarding pass, didn't even glance at hers. Just stood there, certain, entitled, while the cabin hummed with final boarding tension. Above them, the PA crackled. "Cabin doors will close in 10 minutes. Maya exhaled slowly, offering her pass with practiced calm. 2A. Confirmed. The man didn't look. "I always fly up front. Someone screwed something up." A sketch sheet slid from Maya's tote, her book outline. The words, "Who gets to tell the story?" catching the cabin light. 2 rows back, a young writer, Jaden Rowe, raised his phone subtly. 40 viewers, then 50. Something was happening, and everyone could feel the imbalance settling, sharp as a misaligned seatbelt. Have you ever watched something unfair happen right in front of you and felt your chest tighten because you knew it shouldn't have played out that way? Before we continue, I'm curious. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? And if stories about dignity, courage, and everyday justice resonate with you, consider subscribing. It really helps this community grow. All right, take a breath. Let's step back into the cabin, right where everything is about to shift. Here's what happened next. The aisle was still crowded with last-minute boarders when the flight attendant appeared young, tidy, a little breathless, badge slightly crooked from rushing the pre-departure checks. She gave Greg a quick, polite smile before turning to Maya with a softened, careful tone. "Hi, ma'am. Could I take a quick look at your boarding pass again?" Again. Maya's fingers closed around the small blue cardstock as if bracing herself. "You just saw it," she said gently. "No edge, no heat. Just an evenness she had practiced across a lifetime of being asked to prove she belonged." Greg folded his arms. "Maybe she showed you the wrong one." He said it loud enough for the surrounding rows to hear. A faint shift rippled through the nearby passengers, the kind of subtle, uncomfortable turning of heads that meant, "Is there a problem?" The social pressure, even before anything was confirmed, leaned instinctively toward him. The flight attendant, Lena, offered an apologetic smile without true clarity behind it. "It's just, we're almost done boarding. If I can just double-check." She held out her iPad. Its screen flickered, then froze for half a second. A spinning circle pulsed at the top right. Poor connectivity. Poor timing. Perfect setup for bias to slip through. "System's a little slow today," she murmured, tapping the glass again. Maya handed over the boarding pass, controlled and steady. "Here." The hum of the overhead vents pressed down like white noise. The fragrance of someone's floral hand lotion drifted from row 1. A child somewhere in economy coughed. The plane felt suspended, waiting for this one moment to decide whether it would become orderly or unfair. Greg shifted impatiently. "Look, I don't know why this is taking so long. I always get 2A when I'm upgraded. There's probably been a mix-up." His phrasing carried an assumption that didn't require verifying anything. An assumption that said, "I belong here first. You maybe not." Lena scanned the pass, tapping through frozen screens. It says 2A, yes, but the system shows a pending status for an upgrade on this route tonight. She swallowed, glancing toward Greg. "Sir, are you?" Greg lifted his chin. "Platinum Elite. I got the email this morning." He didn't show it. Didn't even reach into his pocket. Lena nodded reflexively, accepting his claim with far less scrutiny than she'd given Maya. Then she turned back to the pass in her hand, as if still searching for a flaw in the cardstock. From 2 rows back, Jaden's phone angled slightly higher. The viewer count ticked upward. 4067112. Jaden whispered into the mic. She already showed her ticket. Why isn't he showing his? No one around him responded, but a few ears sharpened. Maya adjusted the strap of her tote where the corner of her sketch outline her next book proposal peeked out, the sheet with the phrase, "Who gets to tell the story?" still hung near the surface of the bag, An accidental but glaring reminder. She tucked it deeper inside the tote, as if embarrassed to let such symbolism sit so loudly in a moment that required restraint. "Ma'am," Lena said softly, Can you verify that this is indeed your flight? Maybe there was a gate change earlier." Maya blinked. A small, nearly invisible flare of disbelief crossed her face. "I'm on the correct flight. I've flown this route twice this month." She pointed at the barcode. "Please scan that." Lena tried. The spinning wheel kept pulsing. Greg sighed theatrically. "This is ridiculous. I need to stow my bags. I have meetings tomorrow. Can someone just put her in the right seat so we can go?" The right seat. Not her seat. The distinction landed like a slap. Maya inhaled deeply, grounding herself through the simple press of her feet against the carpeted floor. She wasn't going to rise to it. Not yet. Over the PA, a chime sounded. "Cabin doors will close in 7 minutes." 7 minutes. Long enough for bias to root itself. Short enough to trap her in the consequences if this went wrong. Lena attempted another scan. Her brows pinched. "It's not loading. I might need to call someone." "You might need to ask her to move first." Greg cut in. "You can sort the system after." That suggestion, so casual, so confident, dragged a faint, stunned murmur out of the nearest passengers. It was the kind of entitlement that expected the world to rearrange itself on command. Maya said softly, "You haven't checked his pass." Greg's eyes narrowed. "Are you accusing me of lying?" "I'm asking for equal verification." Still calm. Still composed. Still fighting the instinct to shrink under the scrutiny that disproportionately fell on her. Lena hesitated, torn between procedural instinct, time pressure, and a lifetime of unconscious assumptions shaped by who usually occupied first class. "Sir, do you have your boarding pass available?" Greg gave a vague motion toward his jacket pocket without reaching into it. "It's on my phone, or my email, whatever. The system will confirm it." He didn't move. And Lena didn't push. 1122000247 viewers. Jaden whispered again, voice low but urgent. "He's not showing anything. Why isn't anyone asking him to prove it?" Someone across the aisle finally frowned, not at Maya, but at Greg. The balance was starting to shift, ever so slightly, but not enough to matter yet. Lena tapped the iPad screen again. "I'm sorry, Dr. Ellison. I really am. The system just..." Her apology wasn't malicious, just misguided. Just another small mistake in a long chain of mistakes trained into people by repetition and hierarchy. Maya kept her voice level. "I would like both of our passes verified. That's fair. That's standard." Greg scoffed. "Standard isn't the word I'd use." Something in Maya's jaw tightened. But she didn't break. The plane around them buzzed with the low, unsettled tension of a drama passengers weren't sure they should intervene in. A few faces carried sympathy, others indifference. Most simply wanted the flight to leave on time. Lena shifted her weight, torn and frustrated by the lagging technology in her hand. "I'll try again. Just give me a moment." But time was the one thing the plane was quickly running out of. And Maya could feel exactly how the tide would tilt if the moment slipped too far. Behind her, the viewer count hit 300, and a message in the chat flashed. "Why is she being treated like she made the mistake?" Jaden swallowed, angling the camera a little higher. The world was beginning to watch. Not enough to change the outcome. Not yet, but enough to make the imbalance visible, sharp as a line of fluorescent light cutting down the aisle. Enough to make this moment matter. Enough to make it impossible for Maya to sit quietly and let the story be told wrong again. Lena's iPad finally blinked awake, but only long enough to show another spinning wheel before freezing again. She sighed, trying to mask her frustration. Maya could see in the young woman's eyes that she wasn't malicious, just hurried, untrained for this exact collision of time, pressure, and unconscious bias. But Greg didn't hesitate to fill the silence. "Sweetheart, relax." he told Maya, lowering his voice as if offering comfort instead of condescension. Let them figure it out. The word sweetheart dropped between them like a match in dry grass. A few passengers glanced over, not sharply, but with that subtle alertness that comes when a man addresses a woman as if she's fragile, emotional, unreasonable. Maya held his gaze, calm but unyielding. Please don't call me that. Greg blinked, then smirked. Fine, just trying to help. He wasn't. He was trying to reframe the moment, him as the reasonable one, her as the problem. Lena stepped in, still flustered. Sir, if you could just... Greg talked over her, too. I told you, I'm upgraded. The system will show it. Still no phone, no email, not even the suggestion he would look for it. Passengers were now fully watching, not intervening, not yet, but watching. The plane's lights dimmed slightly as the last wave of boarders placed bags overhead. A rolled-up coat brushed Maya's shoulder as someone passed. The air smelled like recirculated citrus cleaner overlaid with the warm plastic of heated cabin walls. The space felt smaller than before. Maya gently retrieved her boarding pass from Lena's hand. Since the system is slow, perhaps you can check his as well. That's standard procedure. It wasn't confrontational. It was common sense. But bias doesn't need logic to thrive. Greg gave a short, incredulous laugh. Why are we wasting time? I have a connection in the morning. From the back of the cabin, the PA chimed again. Cabin doors will close in 7 minutes. 7 minutes, shrinking into 6. Lena swallowed. She tapped the tablet again. Nothing. The system's really behind tonight. Maybe there was a swap? Or maybe your upgrade, sir, isn't showing yet. Greg stiffened. Oh, it's showing. Trust me. Still no movement toward his pocket. Behind them, Jaden whispered into his phone. He still hasn't shown his pass. The viewer counter climbed. 24731, 2420. Messages flickered. Why isn't the FA checking him? This feels off. She literally showed hers. Lena didn't see the chat, but the tension radiated through the air like static. Maya adjusted her tote. A sheet slid up again inside the bag. Her book outline, the same line flashing in her peripheral vision. Who gets to tell the story? She pressed it down, a little harder this time. Greg leaned one elbow on the seatback in front of Maya, casual in a way that claimed ownership of both aisle and space. Ma'am, I've flown this route 100 times. Maybe you just... Just what? The question left Maya before she could soften it. Greg faltered for half a second. Maybe you misread your seat. It happens. Not to him, the sentence implied. To her. Lena stepped between them slightly, palms out in a pacifying gesture. Let me handle this, please. But handling it meant turning back to Maya first. Again. Dr. Ellison, could you confirm your ID for me? It'll help the system cross-match. Maya stared at her. Slowly, quietly. You need my ID, but not his. Lena froze for just a breath. A tiny fracture of awareness, but only tiny. It's just faster, she whispered. We don't have time. Time. Always the weapon used to excuse unfairness. Maya lowered her voice so only Lena could hear. I understand you're under pressure, but do not let his urgency become my punishment. Lena's throat bobbed. She stepped back. Just half a step, but the imbalance had already tipped. Greg said loudly, Are we still on this? Does she really need first class that badly? Someone across the aisle frowned. A man in his late 50s. She paid for her seat, he muttered, but too soft for most to hear. Jaden heard it, his camera tilted to capture the subtle reactions around them. 420600 viewers. Maya felt the hum under her feet, the mild vibration of the cargo bay door locking, the subtle shift of air pressure. The plane was nearly ready. Nearly committed. Greg folded his arms again, shoulders rising with performative impatience. Look, I'm not trying to be rude. But I have legitimate status on this airline. I'm not— Not what? Maya asked. Her tone was still even, still somehow controlled. Greg opened his mouth, closed it. The implication hung anyway. Lena forced a thin smile. Everyone, please stay calm. But calm was not the issue. Fairness was— Jaden whispered. People in the chat are saying she's being singled out. His hand shook slightly with adrenaline as the viewer count rose again. 600,900,1000. 200. A murmur ran through the comments. This is bias. Why hasn't he shown proof? This is making me uncomfortable. Maya took in the cabin, the anxious glances, the shrinking patience, the invisible but palpable expectation that she should be the one to yield. She returned her gaze to Greg. If you believe this is your seat, show your boarding pass. That would settle everything. Greg's jaw clenched. I don't have to prove myself to you. And there it was. The first honest sentence he'd said. Because he didn't think he had to. Not to her. Not to someone like her. Lena stepped in again, voice tightening. Okay, let me try calling support. We're running very low on time. Maya felt the floor tilt, not physically, but morally, just a few degrees further from level. Her heartbeat was steady, but heavy. Her breath measured. Her restraint monumental. But invisibly, the line between patience and humiliation thinned. In front of her, Greg adjusted his collar, returning fully to his default confidence. He glanced at the overhead bin as if imagining his bag already secured. He truly expected to win this. Because people like him usually did. And people like her were expected to behave well while losing. The viewer count climbed again. 1,000, 200, 1,600. The world was watching now. Not loudly, not decisively, but watching. Maya sat a little straighter, her spine steady, her voice level. Verify both of us, she said softly. That's all. But the imbalance in the air was undeniable, weighted, slanted, tightening like a belt, 2 notches too far. The aisle finally cleared, leaving a pocket of stillness around row 2 that felt unnatural, a quiet bubble at the center of a tightening storm. Maya sat with perfect posture, hands folded over her lap, as though she were preparing for a meeting rather than an unwanted confrontation. Lena hovered near her, tablet hugged to her chest like a shield. Dr. Ellison, I promise I'm trying to sort this out, she said in a tone meant to soothe, not to respect. Just give me a moment. Okay? The phrasing struck Maya the way a soft hand can still sting. Give me a moment, spoken to people who must wait, who must be patient, while others are believed more readily. She nodded regardless. Take the time you need. Greg exhaled dramatically, as though he were the one being wronged by all this restraint. We wouldn't be in this mess if she'd just moved when asked. Maya didn't rise to it, didn't even turn her head. Instead, she gently bent to pick up a magazine someone had dropped in the aisle moments before. She set it on the armrest between her and the aisle, a small, instinctive gesture of courtesy that contrasted sharply with Greg's bluster. A man across the aisle noticed. His posture softened, a faint flicker of shame crossing his features. Not because of anything said, but because kindness under pressure is hard to ignore. Lena stepped away to the jump seat to call support. Her voice trailed off into fragments. System not updating upgrade mismatch pending verification. Yes, she showed hers. No, he hasn't yet. Greg didn't even pretend to listen. He adjusted the cuff of his blazer, angled himself toward Maya with a cool, dismissive confidence. You know, he said, first class comes with certain expectations. Priority, efficiency, people who know how this works. With 40 projector, projector and 7. There was a time in her 20s when that comment would have sunk under her skin like a thorn. Not tonight. Maya met his eyes with calm steel. I'm aware of how it works. Her voice stayed low, controlled. Her tote bag shifted as she did, and the corner of her book outline slid upward again, the handwritten page that read, "Who gets to tell the story?" She pressed it down gently, almost with care, as though protecting a small, fragile truth. 1,600, 2,200 viewers. Jaden whispered to his phone, "She's staying so calm. It's unreal. He's provoking her." Comments flickered fast. "She's handling this better than anyone would. This feels wrong. Why won't he show his pass?" A woman in row 3 leaned forward slightly, catching Maya's eye. Just a soft nod and unspoken, "I see what's happening." Not enough to intervene, but enough to matter. The plane's ambient hum grew deeper as the air conditioning dialed back for pushback prep. The lights dimmed into pre-flight mode, cooler, bluer, a shade that made every sharp edge of this moment more apparent. Lena returned, still holding the tablet, shoulders tight. "Okay," she said gently. "Support wants me to recheck your pass one more time, Dr. Ellison. It'll help them cross-match on their end." Maya inhaled, slow. "I've given it to you twice." "I know," Lena murmured, voice falling into that soft, infantilizing register again, "but it'll really help." It wasn't said with malice. Just presumption directed at the person who seemed most reasonable to pressure. Maya offered the pass again. Steady as a mountain. Greg watched, satisfied that the narrative was shifting his way. This is why I said she should have moved. It would have saved everyone so much time. Maya turned her face toward the window instead of toward him. Outside, the runway lights shimmered in parallel rows, cold and unwavering. It reminded her of the nights she'd written grant proposals long after midnight, when she was building her publishing company from scratch nights, where she taught herself that silence is not the same as submission. The memory grounded her. Lena scanned the boarding pass again, or tried to. The loading wheel spun, paused, spun again. Her jaw tightened. When she spoke, it was barely above a whisper. "It still isn't pulling through. I might need to ask you to wait a moment while we sort the seat assignment." Maya lifted her gaze. "Wait, where?" Lena faltered. "Just maybe stand in the galley area? Just until it updates?" The ask landed like something heavy. Not shouted, not aggressive, but quietly humiliating. She wanted to place Maya aside, out of sight, out of the way, while Greg stayed planted exactly where he was, unverified, unquestioned. Jaden's breath caught, the phone jerked. 2,200, 3,400 viewers. The cabin reacted, two tiny movements everywhere, shoulders stiffening, eyes widening. One woman's lips parted as if to speak, then pressed shut. Maya answered slowly, clearly, "You want me to leave my paid seat and wait standing while he stays seated without verification?" Lena's cheeks flushed. "I'm not saying it like that, but that is what it is." Lena had no answer. Greg smirked, victorious. "See? We're getting somewhere." The man in row 3 leaned even farther forward now, brows drawing together. He wasn't intervening yet, but the moral line had shifted again. Subtly. But shift it did. Maya's voice lowered to a gentle firmness. "I'm willing to cooperate, but not to be displaced." She didn't raise her tone. She didn't make a scene. She didn't play into the stereotype Greg was desperately waiting for. It was a quiet, powerful refusal, one that made a few passengers inhale softly. Lena stepped back, caught between the tablet, the time pressure, and the uncomfortable truth of her own choices. Somewhere behind them, luggage thumped into an overhead bin. A seatbelt clicked. The final passengers settled into place. The cabin was now fully enclosed, heat rising from human bodies and tension. Jaden swallowed hard, chats blowing up. He wasn't wrong. Comments flared. "She's being asked to stand? This is bias 101. I'm getting angry for her." But Maya wasn't angry. She was steady. And because she stayed steady, the room shifted again away from the assumption that she was the problem toward the awareness that she'd been remarkably patient in the face of blatant imbalance. Breathing space. Full. Visible. Earned. But the pressure, quiet, systemic tightening was still rising. The air inside the cabin grew heavier, though the temperature hadn't changed. It was the kind of weight that gathered when something unjust lingered too long, an invisible pressure building against the walls of a space that could no longer stretch to contain it. Lena held the tablet in both hands, shoulders curled forward as though shielding herself from the conflict she was unintentionally fueling. "Dr. Ellison," she murmured, "I just need you to stay calm. We're trying to figure this out." There it was. The tone, soft, patronizing. A tone that assumed Maya was the one on the verge of breaking. Maya blinked once, slowly. "I am calm." But Lena continued anyway, a gentle hush meant for a child rather than a woman who had built a publishing empire from her kitchen table. "I just don't want this to escalate. Let me handle it, okay?" Handle it. As if she had been handling it well. Greg chuckled from behind Lena's shoulder, arms crossed with renewed confidence. "See? She's getting worked up. This is what I was talking about." Maya didn't move, didn't breathe, in any way that could be misread. Her stillness was a discipline, not submission. The passenger in row 3 who'd stayed quiet until now shifted again, discomfort edging across his brow. But he didn't speak. Not yet. Jaden's livestream viewer count climbed at a rate that was no longer subtle. 3,000, 400, 4,000, 800, 6,200. Chat exploded. "She's literally sitting still. Why are they telling her to calm down? Why is he calling her emotional? This is bias layered on bias." Lena tapped her tablet again, then flinched at whatever message flickered back. "Support says they can't confirm the upgrade yet, so I need you." She looked at Maya. To step aside for a moment. Maya stared at her. Quiet. Unblinking. Heart steady. "Step aside. Where?" Lena gestured vaguely toward the front galley. "Just over there. I'll need to reseat you temporarily while we sort out the paperwork." Greg smiled, victorious. "Thank you," finally. The smile hurt more than the words. Maya inhaled through her nose. Deep, slow, anchoring. She heard her grandmother's voice in her memory, the one that always calmed storms. Never fear being seen. Fear being unseen. She wouldn't disappear into a galley like an inconvenience. "Lena," Maya said softly, "you haven't checked his boarding pass even once." That truth landed like a clean blade, sharp, unavoidable. Lena's face flushed. I know. But he says," Maya repeated. "And that's enough?" Greg scoffed. "She's making this harder than it needs to be." "You haven't produced your pass," Maya replied. He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a hiss meant for her alone. "I don't have to jump just because you ask. I earned my status." Her eyes hardened, not angry, but resolute. "And I earned my seat." The surrounding passengers felt the shift, an emotional tightening, a line drawn without raising a voice. The plane creaked softly as someone in first class secured their luggage overhead. The seatbelt sign blinked with a quiet ding, though it wouldn't truly mean anything until they were airborne. Outside, a faint halo from runway lights washed pale gold across the window's edge. Then, suddenly, the corner of Maya's sketch outline slid further up from her tote. This time, the word wasn't story. It was a single line on a draft chapter heading. Belonging. Greg's eyes flicked down at it, then back to her face, misunderstanding entirely. "Whatever that is, it won't help you. Policy is policy." Policy. Conveniently invoked by people who didn't need to understand it. Maya placed her hand over the paper, steadying it. The gesture was small, but it carried a gravity Lena couldn't ignore. Because for the first time, Lena hesitated. Truly hesitated. Her eyes darted between Maya's composed stillness and Greg's easy arrogance. The contrast was undeniable. "Lena," came a call from the jump seat, an older FA adjusting paperwork. "If you need to reseat someone, Make sure manifest discrepancies are verified both ways. Both ways. The phrase drifted across the air like a lifeline, soft, procedural, neutral, but it carried weight. Yet Greg pounced first. "We don't have time for that! You can confirm my status after takeoff. Just reseat her now!" Maya's jaw tightened by a fraction. And Lena, already nervous, already overwhelmed, made the mistake that would define the midpoint reversal. She stepped toward Maya with a gentle hand raised. "Ma'am, I'm asking you nicely. Please stand." The cabin gasped, not audibly, but emotionally, an inhale of disbelief. A woman in row 1 whispered, "She paid for that seat." Row 3's man muttered, "This isn't right." Jaden whispered fiercely, "This is it. Chat, do you see this? She's telling her to stand." Viewer count surged. 6,000, 200, 9,000, 12,000, 400. Greg leaned back, satisfied. "Told you. Done." Maya rose, but only slightly. Only enough to shift, not enough to yield. She looked at Lena, voice low and steady. "I will not stand, so he can sit." Lena froze. "That is not a request you would make of him," Maya continued, "and you still haven't verified his pass." Greg sputtered, "Why should I?" "Because," Maya said, turning to him fully for the first time, "you are the one making the claim." It was the cleanest line of the night, quiet truth, spoken with full moral weight. Row 3 finally spoke aloud. "He hasn't shown anything. She's right. Check both." Then another voice. And another. Soft, but growing. Maya didn't revel in it. Didn't smirk. Didn't even sigh. She simply sat back down, slow, deliberate, claiming the seat she'd paid for. The entire cabin felt the shift. For the first time, Greg's certainty wavered. And Maya, without theatrics, without raising her voice, became the moral center of the plane. The cabin lights dimmed again as the flight attendants prepared the cabin for departure. Outside, the jet bridge rattled while locking into place. The shift in pressure made the air feel tighter, like the plane itself knew time was running out. Lena stood frozen after Maya's refusal. The young attendant looked down at her tablet, then toward the front galley, clearly unsure what to do now that the simple, biased path had been interrupted. Then the overhead intercom crackled. A controlled voice, older, authoritative, cut through the cabin noise. "Flight attendants, prepare for final paperwork check. 3 minutes remaining." 3 minutes. A countdown that wasn't aimed at Maya but somehow landed on her shoulders anyway. Greg straightened, emboldened by the announcement. "Hear that? We're out of time. Just move her so we can close the doors." The man in row 3 spoke up more firmly this time. "She shouldn't move. She paid for that seat." Greg snapped back. "Sir, this doesn't concern you." But it did now. It concerned everyone. Because fairness had become a public event. Lena pressed the call button for supervisory support, her hands trembling slightly. Her training manuals never covered moments like this, where time, bias, and public scrutiny collided at once. Within seconds, a man with a navy vest and a clipped badge stepped onto the aircraft. Mid-40s, calm face, authoritative posture, the supervisor. "Status?" he asked sharply. Lena tried to summarize. "System mismatch. Potential upgrade discrepancy. We're trying to confirm." Greg cut in before she could finish. "I'm Platinum Elite. That's my seat. She's supposed to be in coach. Just reseat her." Maya's eyes narrowed, not with anger, but with a quiet precision that made the supervisor look at her for the first time. "Ma'am?" he asked. Maya held out her boarding pass. "Seat 2A. I've shown it multiple times. I have not seen his." The supervisor turned to Greg. "Sir, I'll need your boarding pass as well." A beat of absolute crystalline silence. Greg hesitated. Just long enough for the truth to show. It's on my phone," he said, patting his jacket in vague circles but not reaching inside. The supervisor's brow shifted barely a millimeter. The first indicator that the story Greg had been selling all this time wasn't airtight. "I'll still need to see it," the supervisor said. Greg didn't move. "Your system will confirm it. Just reseat her so we can push back." The supervisor took the tablet from Lena. It lagged again, frozen between two screens. He frowned. "Network delay. I can't verify either of you through the system right now." He looked between them, two passengers, one calm, one indignant, and made a procedural mistake, disguised as neutrality. "Until support confirms the discrepancy," he said, "the safest option is to hold the seat." Hold. As if the seat didn't already belong to someone. As if Maya were currently occupying it illegitimately. Greg seized the moment, which means she needs to move. The supervisor didn't correct him. He didn't agree, either. But silence is its own decision in moments like these. Maya spoke softly. "I am not moving from a seat I paid for." The supervisor exhaled. "Ma'am, if the system is unclear and both parties claim the seat—" "I showed proof," Maya said. "He hasn't." A murmur rippled through the cabin, this time louder. Row 3's man nodded. A woman from row 1 whispered, "She's right," while another passenger leaned forward to watch. And the live stream surged. 12,000. 418,000. 722,000. 900 viewers. Jaden whispered fiercely, "Chat is blowing up. They're saying this is discrimination. They're tagging the airline." Comments appeared in rapid, scrolling bursts. He still hasn't produced anything. How is the system unclear when she has her ticket? This is systemic bias. She better not be forced to move. Greg felt the shift too. His face flushed. But he doubled down. This is ridiculous. Just put her somewhere else. She's delaying the entire plane. Maya's voice remained even. "I'm sitting where I belong." The supervisor rubbed his forehead. He wasn't biased like Greg, but he was pressured by timing, by protocol, by the threat of a delay report he'd have to justify later. "Let me call support again," he said, stepping into the galley. As he left, cabin noise swelled, restless passengers shifting, overhead bins thudding shut, the vent humming harder to balance heat from packed bodies. In the middle of the tension, Maya's tote slipped again. That same page? That same ink scratch of her handwriting. Belonging. The word reflected in the glossy plastic of the seat back in front of her. It looked like it had been placed there on purpose, an ironic prophecy. Greg noticed the word, too. "You really brought homework on the plane?" he sneered. Maya didn't answer. She wasn't speaking to him anymore. Instead, she looked at Lena, really looked at her. The young attendant's eyes were glistening with stress, confusion, and the painful realization that she might have mishandled everything without meaning to. "Lena," Maya said quietly, "I need you to hear something." Lena swallowed. "Okay." "This situation didn't escalate because I raised my voice," Maya said. "It escalated because you placed more trust in someone who offered less proof." Lena blinked, stunned, not scolded, but illuminated. It hit her harder than any reprimand. Before she could speak, the supervisor returned. "Support still cannot verify the upgrade," he said. "Network mismatch. They're recommending—" He hesitated. Recommending what? He didn't want to say it. But the clock forced him. That we offload one passenger if the dispute is not resolved before door closure. Gasps. Actual, audible gasps. Greg stiffened. "Well, that's obviously—" But now, even he couldn't finish the sentence. Not under the weight of 24 watching passengers. Not under the glare of a live stream nearing 30,000 viewers. Not under the pressure of a moral line he had crossed too casually. And Maya, sitting with absolute impossible poise, simply said, "I will not be the one removed." The supervisor's words hung in the air like a blade suspended by a single fraying thread. Support recommends that if the discrepancy is not resolved in the next minute, we may need to offload one passenger to avoid delaying the flight. A hush fell over the cabin. Not silence, but a charged, electric stillness. Greg straightened, emboldened again by procedural language he barely understood. Well, that shouldn't be hard. She's the one causing the delay. Maya didn't react. Not outwardly. Her hands remained folded, her breathing steady. But inside, a cold clarity sharpened. This wasn't just Greg anymore. This wasn't even just Lena. This was the system deciding that the simplest solution was to remove the person who had already proven herself. Lena stepped closer to Maya, voice trembling somewhere between pleading and misplaced sympathy. Dr. Ellison, I'm sorry. I really am. But maybe just to avoid getting removed, you could come stand with me in the galley, just until the supervisor verifies things? There it was again. That instinct to tuck away the person who didn't fit the narrative. Before Maya could respond, the PA announcement cut through the cabin. 1 minute until cabin doors close. 1 minute. The words cracked down like thunder. A few passengers inhaled sharply. Row 3's man muttered, "This is insane." Louder this time, his frustration spilling past politeness. A woman in row 1 turned fully toward the aisle now, her lips pressed in firm disapproval. The cabin itself felt smaller, as if the overhead bins had lowered by an inch, the distance between rows collapsing. The hum of the air vents deepened, like a held breath before a storm. Jaden's phone shook in his hands. 22,000, 900, 30,000, 400, 38,000, 700 viewers. Chat, he whispered breathless. They're saying she might get kicked off the plane. They're tagging the airline on every post. Comments scrolled faster than he could read. Offload him. He has no proof. This is discrimination full stop. Why is she being punished for his entitlement? Tag local news. Greg sensed the rising discomfort around him and tried to reclaim control. She's making this difficult, he insisted, turning to the supervisor. And your system clearly has my upgrade. You just need to prioritize getting us out on time. The supervisor pinched the bridge of his nose. He wasn't hostile, just exhausted, pressed on all sides by schedule, expectations, and the fear of being held responsible for a delay. Sir, I need to see your boarding pass, he repeated, firmer now. Greg bristled. I already told you it's on my phone. Then please show it. Greg didn't move. Not a single muscle. The refusal wasn't about logistics. It was about power, about not wanting to be questioned by someone he had already deemed beneath explanation. Maya spoke for the first time since the ultimatum was issued. If someone must be offloaded, she said quietly, it should be the passenger who has provided no proof of his claim. A ripple swept the cabin. Not loud, but unmistakable. Row 3's man nodded vigorously. Exactly. Row 1's woman said she has her boarding pass. He hasn't shown anything. Another voice chimed in. This isn't how procedure works. Greg turned, defensive and hard-edged. Mind your business, all of you. The supervisor finally stepped in. Sir, yelling will not help. Greg sputtered. I'm not yelling. But he was. Everyone could hear it. Everyone could see the unraveling. Meanwhile, Maya remained composed, elegant, immovable, dignified in a way that exposed every crack in Greg's posture. A paper slid from her tote and brushed her knee. The same outline page, the same handwritten title, Belonging. The word stared at her like a dare. Jaden zoomed in without meaning to. The chat recognized the symbolism instantly. Oh my God, the word belonging, this is poetic. She literally wrote the theme of this situation. Protect this woman at all costs. The supervisor received a buzz on his radio. He listened, jaw tight. Finally, he spoke. Support is still unable to confirm either seat assignment due to system mismatch. We have 30 seconds. Greg took a triumphant step forward. Then, she needs to go. No, Maya said, her voice calm but resonant enough to cut cleanly across the row. I will not be removed for someone else's unverified claim. Greg threw his hands up. This is unbelievable. Lena looked at the supervisor, eyes wide with panic. What do we do? Before he could answer, Row 3's man raised his voice. "She stays." Row 1's woman added, "Check his pass or stop harassing her." Another passenger. "This isn't fair." It was small, but it was public. And public matters, especially with nearly 40,000 viewers watching live. Jaden whispered. "Chad is calling for the supervisor by name. Someone found his badge number on the recording. Oh my God, they're tagging corporate." Pressure. Real pressure. Not just emotional. Reputational. The supervisor exhaled, shoulders rising and falling with the weight of an impossible choice. Then he delivered the final blow of the beat. "If this is not resolved in 10 seconds, protocol states we must remove the passenger whose status is unverified." Greg paled. For the first time, he paled. "Unverified?" he repeated. The supervisor nodded. "Sir, that means you." The words sliced through the cabin like a sudden oxygen rush, changing everything. For one suspended breath, no one moved. Not Greg. Not Maya. Not even the air seemed to shift. A countdown, silent, internal, undeniable, hung between them. 10, 9, 8. The supervisor's ultimatum hovered over the cabin like a loaded weapon. 10 seconds, he repeated quietly. More to himself than to anyone else. Greg stepped backward, startled by the word unverified, as if hearing it for the first time. His face reddened anger, fear, disbelief, twisting together in an expression he could no longer control. Maya didn't move. Not a breath wasted. Not a muscle tensed. Her stillness made the collapsing of Greg's bravado all the more visible. But the breaking point didn't come from Maya. It came from 2 rows behind her. Jaden stood, not halfway, not uncertainly. He stood fully, shoulders square, phone raised openly now. No more subtle angles or timid recording. His voice sliced through the charged air. Everyone can hear this. The cabin froze. The supervisor turned. Lena startled. Greg hasn't shown his boarding pass even once. Dr. Ellison has shown hers multiple times. If you're following procedure, check both or stop harassing her. The clarity, the volume, the conviction. He didn't yell. He didn't shake. He spoke with the authority of someone who had finally stepped into his own voice. Greg spun around. "Sit down! This has nothing to do with you!" Jaden did not flinch. It has everything to do with her being treated differently. And the entire internet is watching. As if summoned by the words, the live stream counter surged. 38,000, 752,000, 67,000, 481,000, 903 viewers. Passengers gasped softly. A few lifted their own phones. Someone whispered, "Oh my God, this is national news level." Greg pointed accusingly at Jaden. "This kid is recording illegally. Tell him to stop." But the supervisor's eyes were on the viewer count displayed in bright reflection across Jaden's screen. He wasn't thinking about social media policies anymore. He was thinking about headlines. And consequences. Row 3's man stood up too. "He's right." She showed her proof. He didn't. "Check his pass." Row 1's woman added, louder than she intended, "Stop punishing the wrong person." A chorus began, not organized, not orchestrated, but irrefutably united. "She has the ticket. He's the one refusing. This isn't fair. Verify both or stop." The walls of Greg's confidence cracked. His jaw trembled. He started pacing in a tiny, useless semicircle, searching for someone, anyone, to rescue him. But the power had shifted completely. For the first time since he boarded, Greg looked small. Lena seemed frozen in place, one hand to her mouth, eyes wide as the realization washed over her. She had become part of something deeply wrong. The supervisor tried to regain control. "Everyone, please remain seated." But Jaden spoke again, calmer now. "Sir, the problem is simple. He is unverified. She is not. Removing her would be a discriminatory action, and there are 80,000 people watching this in real time. Gasps flickered across the cabin. Greg stammered, You don't understand. They messed up the system." "Then show your boarding pass," Maya said quietly. Her voice was softer than anyone expected. It wasn't a challenge. It wasn't a triumph. It was an invitation to honesty. And that somehow terrified Greg more than accusations ever could. His face crumpled. Not fully. Not yet. But enough that the first hairline fractures of truth shimmered beneath the surface. Lena stepped closer, her tone trembling. "Sir, please, just show your pass." Greg's throat bobbed. It's not loading." The supervisor extended a hand. "We can try scanning it manually." Greg didn't reach for his phone. He couldn't. His hands wouldn't move. The truth was no longer a secret. It clung to the air, thick and undeniable. One passenger whispered, "He lied." Another, "He never had 2A." Another, "He was bluffing the whole time." And the cameras, every phone lifted, every screen glowing, captured Greg's unraveling in brutal clarity. Maya closed her eyes for a breath. Not in victory. In exhaustion. The page in her tote slipped again, landing gently against her thigh. Belonging. A word now witnessed by 80,000 strangers. A word that had become prophecy. Greg's voice cracked when he finally spoke. I thought..." He couldn't finish. Not with the entire plane watching. Not with the internet watching. Not with the truth pressing down from all angles. The supervisor exhaled, making his decision. "Sir," he said carefully, "if you cannot produce verification, the protocol recommends..." Greg shook his head violently, whispering, "Please, don't." And in that instant, he wasn't the antagonist. He was a man cracking under the weight of his own choices. The supervisor's final words, "Sir, that means you," had cracked Greg open in a way no accusation ever could. It was as if the shell he had worn so tightly around himself suddenly folded inward. He stood there, rigid, eyes darting from Maya to the supervisor to the rows of passengers who now stared openly. His face, flushed moments earlier with indignation, drained to a sickly pale. I didn't mean for it to go this far," he muttered, barely audible. No one responded. Not yet. The crowd wanted justice, not context. But Maya saw something shift in the angle of his shoulders, something raw, unguarded. A ripple of vulnerability she hadn't expected in the man who had spent the last 15 minutes undermining her humanity. Greg finally reached for his jacket pocket. Not hurriedly, not defensively, but with the slow, heavy movement of someone bracing for pain. He pulled out a folded phone, one with a cracked screen. When he tapped it awake, a notification covered the entire display. Upgrade request denied. Time-stamped 2 hours earlier. He stared at it, as if seeing it for the first time. A wave of shock moved across the cabin, quiet but unmistakable. Jaden's phone trembled in his hand. The chat flew so quickly, it became a blur of disbelief and accusation. But Greg wasn't looking at the camera anymore. He wasn't even looking at his phone. His gaze drifted downward, unfocused, as if falling through years. "My son had this seat," he whispered. The words didn't land at first. Passengers exchanged confused glances. Even the supervisor blinked, unsure what he meant. Greg swallowed, voice splintering apart. 3 years ago, on this route, he was flying to visit his mom after our divorce. They bumped him, said there was a mix-up, put him in the back near the lavatory. His breath hitched. The cabin, once roaring with judgment, fell still. And he was terrified of flying. Greg rubbed his forehead with the back of his hand. He called me before takeoff, crying, saying he didn't belong up front with the important people. Maya's heartbeat slowed. The word belong echoed through her, falling directly onto the page nestled in her tote. Greg went on, voice unraveling. After the flight landed, he deleted the photos he'd taken of his seat assignment. Said it wasn't meant for me. A week later, he told his therapist he hated himself for taking space. He let out a shaky breath. When I got the upgrade notification today, I thought, maybe this time I could fix something stupid and small, reclaim something. I don't know. His voice broke. But they denied it, and I couldn't stand feeling that same helplessness again. He looked up at Maya, and for the first time, his eyes held no arrogance. Only grief. I didn't want to steal your seat, he whispered. I just couldn't handle losing mine again. The cabin softened, imperceptibly at first. Not sympathy, not forgiveness, but recognition that entitlement is often a mask, and cruelty is sometimes just a wound rotting without sunlight. Jaden slowly lowered his phone. The live stream was still running, but he turned the camera down toward his own feet, as if shielding this moment from the public. He whispered into the mic, This part is not for the internet." And viewers watched only the blur of carpet as the audio continued softly in the background. Maya inhaled a steady, controlled breath and leaned slightly forward. "Greg," she said gently, "your pain is real, and I'm sorry you went through that." His chin shook, a silent nod. "But hurting someone else," she continued, "will not heal what happened, and taking my seat won't return his." Greg winced, but not out of anger. Out of truth. A truth he had avoided for too long. Lena's eyes filled, the weight of the moment landing hard on her own early mistakes. The supervisor stepped slightly back, giving space neither procedural nor official, simply human. Greg whispered, "I didn't know how to stop once I started. I was afraid of looking wrong, of being wrong." Maya didn't offer absolution. She didn't offer punishment. She simply held his gaze steady, grounded, humane. "You have the power to stop now," she said softly. The cabin held its breath. Greg nodded, slowly. A nod that carried surrender, apology, and something quieter, a willingness to unclench. For the first time since boarding, he sat down. Not in 2A, not in triumph, but in the nearest empty seat down the aisle, as though gravity had finally claimed him. His hands trembled in his lap. Maya's tote shifted again, and the page slid halfway into view. Belonging. This time, she didn't tuck it away. Because now, both of them finally understood what it meant. The cabin felt different now. Not lighter, not exactly calmer, but recalibrated. Greg sat 2 rows back, shoulders hunched, staring at the floor as if afraid to lift his eyes and meet the reality he had created. The passengers around him avoided staring, but their silence was steeped in something between discomfort and sympathy. The supervisor returned from the galley holding his radio and the still flickering tablet. "Dr. Ellison," he said, his tone formally steady now. "Support has finally confirmed. Seat 2A is yours, without question." He swallowed before continuing. "And due to what has occurred, the airline is initiating an immediate seat dispute audit on this route. Dual verification will be mandatory going forward." He inhaled, the weight of responsibility pulling at his voice. "And our team will be filing an internal assessment on today's handling." Lena's eyes lowered. She knew where part of that assessment would land. Maya nodded once. "Thank you." Justice felt quiet, not triumphant. But it was justice all the same. The supervisor added, "Boarding will resume in 1 minute. Anyone needing to change seats due to the disruption may speak to me directly." Row 3's man raised a hand. "She doesn't need to move. Everyone else should stay put." A few passengers murmured in agreement. But Maya wasn't looking at them. She was looking at Greg. He hadn't moved since the truth came out. He looked smaller now, a man undone by grief, guilt, and consequences landing all at once. Maya stood, just slightly, leaning toward his row. The cabin watched, hushed. She walked the 2 steps to the side aisle, not toward confrontation, but toward closure, and stopped where only he could hear her. Greg didn't look up. "Greg," she said softly. He flinched, breath-catching as though he expected anger he'd earned 10 times over. Instead, she offered something else. A quiet space to tell the truth without an audience. "I'm not excusing what happened," she said, "but I heard what you said about your son." Greg's jaw tightened. A tear he'd been holding back slipped down and disappeared into his collar. "He felt he didn't belong," Greg whispered. "And I made it worse today. I did to you what was done to him. I just couldn't stand the feeling coming back." Maya let that sit with him, not to comfort, but to let the truth settle honestly. "You can't fix that pain by giving it to someone else," she said softly. "The hurt doesn't leave you when you hand it off. It just grows." Greg nodded, trembling. "I'm sorry. For everything. For lying. For dragging you into my mess. You didn't deserve any of it." His apology wasn't polished. It wasn't cinematic. It was messy, cracked, human. The kind that costs something to say. Maya breathed in slowly. "Thank you for saying that." Behind her, the page in her tote shifted again, the handwritten heading, "Belonging," staring up like a final reminder. When Greg followed her gaze and saw the word, he exhaled shakily. "That's what all this was about, wasn't it? Belonging." Maya gave a small, sad smile. In ways neither of us expected. She didn't forgive him. Not exactly. But she allowed his humanity to re-enter the room, which was its own kind of grace. As she turned to return to her seat, Greg whispered, "I hope someday you write about this." Maya paused, looking at him not with pity, but with clear-eyed compassion. "I will," she said, "but not to punish, to remind." She slipped back into 2A with the poise of someone who had fought and won without raising her voice. The supervisor approached again. "Dr. Ellison, the airline would like to offer a formal apology, and once we're airborne, the captain would like to speak with you, if you're willing." Maya nodded, accepting the gesture without vanity. Jaden stepped forward hesitantly, his phone now entirely off. "I stopped the live stream," he said softly. "The last part, it didn't feel right to share." She smiled at him, warm, proud, and grateful. That was the right call. He hesitated. "Thank you for standing your ground. A lot of people saw strength tonight." "Not strength," she replied gently. "Just clarity." The plane chime sounded. "Cabin crew, prepare for departure." As Maya settled, she pulled the outline page fully into her lap. One last time, the word caught the cabin light. "Belonging." She traced it with her thumb and whispered the line that would become the final sentence of the chapter she now knew she needed to write. Everyone deserves to keep their seat, and their story. The engines hummed. The lights dimmed. And justice quiet, earned, and humans settled into the cabin as the plane prepared to lift into the night. How did this story land for you? Which moment hit the hardest? Maya's quiet strength, the witness finally speaking up, or the truth Greg couldn't run from anymore? If this journey moved you in any way, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories about justice, humanity, and the power of voice, like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss the next one. Your engagement keeps these stories alive.